So, Deadline just dropped a piece that basically says the quiet part out loud. Wall Street analysts are blaming us, the audience, for the failure of Elio. Not the marketing, not the release strategy, not the fact that going to the movies now costs as much as a week's worth of groceries. Nope. According to TD Cohen analyst Doug Kreutz, the reason Elio had the worst opening in Pixar history is because the audiences just don't show up for original animation anymore. His exact words? Quote, "Don't blame film execs, blame the audience." End quote. And that's the spark for this entire episode. Because that's not just wrong. It's dangerous. It's the kind of logic that leads studios to greenlight nothing but sequels, reboots, and legacy IP until the entire industry collapses under the weight of its own repetition. And it completely ignores the reality of what it costs financially and emotionally for people to show up to a theater in 2025. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Elio, about Pixar, about the death of originality, and about how the system, not the audience, is what's broken. Because if we don't push back on this narrative now, we're going to lose more than just one movie. We're going to lose the very reason we fell in love with movies in the first place. There's this weird warped narrative emerging that audiences just don't care about original stories anymore. That if it's not a sequel, a reboot, or part of some legacy IP that's been running since the Clinton administration, we're just simply not interested. But here's what that take conveniently ignores. Most people aren't skipping movies because they suddenly hate creativity. They're skipping because the cost of a single trip to the movies is now on par with just owning the movie outright. And if you've got a family, game over. You're not going to gamble $60+ on a film you might not even like when you could wait a couple of months and stream it from your couch. This isn't about laziness. It's about survival. People have to be strategic now. You have to be picky choosy. Moviegoing used to be casual, spontaneous. Now it's a high-stakes decision, and blaming audiences for that is like yelling at someone for skipping a restaurant when all they can afford is instant ramen. And look, there's been some chatter about how Disney trained audiences to wait by dropping Soul, Luca, and Turning Red straight onto Disney Plus with no premium price tag. Sure, Raya and the Last Dragon and Black Widow had that $30 surcharge, but those didn't land nearly as well. So yeah, you could argue that Disney sent mixed signals, but let's not pretend that streaming alone killed the appetite for original stories. The bigger issue? Moviegoing itself just isn't what it used to be. Back in the day, I know I'm sounding like an old man here and I'm not even 30 yet, a teenager with a part-time job could see 2, even 3 movies a week. It was how you killed time, how you hung out with friends, how you dated. Going to the movies was a cheap date. It was a sitcom trope because it was so universal. Remember that Seinfeld episode where Jerry takes a girl to see Schindler's List and they end up making out through the whole thing? That's how common the ritual was. People cracked jokes about it on primetime TV. Titanic didn't become a cultural juggernaut because we were all obsessed with maritime disaster accuracy. No, dudes took their girlfriends to see it because they knew what happened to Jack at the end. Spoiler alert for one of the most famous movie endings ever, but yeah, Jack dies. And the goal? Make your girlfriend cry so she'd lean into your shoulder by the third act. That movie wasn't just a date, it was a plan. And guys saw it 6, 7, 8 times in theaters, not for the spectacle, but for the emotional setup it gave them. That shared emotional journey? That's what we're losing. That's what studios are forgetting. Let me give you a personal example. I went to see Furious 7 on opening weekend all the way back in 2015. The ending was a tribute to Paul Walker, Dominic and Brian on the highway, splitting paths as See You Again by Wiz Khalifa plays. I sat in that theater with more men than women, and let me tell you, every guy in that room was holding back tears. And failing. These were big, strong guys, you know, the type who probably bench press trucks, eat bowls of nails for breakfast without any milk. But none of that mattered. That ending shattered people. Why? Because it caught everyone off guard. and because we all felt it together. You could feel the air in that room change. I've tried to rewatch that ending at home. It hits differently. It still stirs something, but it doesn't shake you like it did in that packed theater. The gravity isn't the same without the silence, the sniffles, the shared memory of a collective goodbye. And if we're talking about how audience energy shapes how we perceive a scene, let's talk about Zootopia, the DMV scene. On paper, a sloth slowly processing paperwork. For kids, kind of funny, but for adults, that theater erupted. Not a single child was laughing during that scene, but every adult in there was absolutely dying because we've all lived that DMV experience. The pacing, the frustration, the dead-eyed stare of the sloth, it was painfully real. But the reason it worked so well wasn't just because it was clever. It was because you felt that shared understanding ripple through the room. That knowing laugh, that catharsis. And you want the most extreme example of how theatrical context shapes an experience? It's the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Watching it at home on your couch is fine. You get the songs, the style, the weirdness, but seeing it in a packed theater at midnight with people screaming lines, throwing rice, dancing in the aisles of the time warp, that's not just a movie, it's a ritual. You become part of the show. You're not just consuming entertainment, you're inside it. It's community, camp, chaos, and the magic is only fully alive in that shared space. You can't replicate that energy on your TV no matter how much you crank the volume or dim the lights. The room matters. The people matter. The permission to be loud, weird, emotional, reactive, that's something theaters give us that living rooms don't. And that's the real danger when studios decide certain films are fine for streaming only. They're not just changing how we watch, they're changing what these stories mean. Different genres need that communal charge. Horror relies on synchronized tension and release. Comedy depends on contagious laughter. Even romance or drama gains weight when you're surrounded by people reacting in real time. When you laugh, gasp, or cry as a group, it's validating. It multiplies the impact. That's why moments like the Minecraft movie's chicken jockey line blew up. People screamed it in theaters like it was a battle cry. That moment became a legend not because it was so well written, it became legend because it was shared. And then there's the opposite. Studios misreading meme culture in the worst way. When Sony re-released Morbius based on the It's Morbin Time memes, thinking they'd found viral gold, they got burned again because they mistook mockery for momentum. It wasn't love, it was irony. And you can't meme your way to success if nobody's actually in on the joke. Meanwhile, Bridget Jones' Mad About the Boy got a full theatrical release in Australia and the UK. And in the US, it was dropped cold onto Peacock. No buzz, no shared laughs, no cultural moment, because the studio assumed that a couch and a screen are enough. They're not. That story, that franchise, deserved more than a quiet content drop on a Thursday. And while we're talking about what's broken in the system, we've got to talk the ballooning budgets. Elio had a reported production budget of $150 million. That's 5 times what Toy Story cost back in 1995, just $30 million. And Toy Story was revolutionary. It was the first fully computer animated feature film. It changed the industry, and it did that on a fraction of the budget. Now, we've got movies like Fast X clocking in at $340 million. That's not including marketing, that's just production. And when your movie needs to make close to $1 billion just to break even, that's not a business model. That's a high-stakes gamble. It's like building a casino on top of a house of cards and hoping the wind doesn't blow. Studios have convinced themselves that bigger budgets equal bigger impact, but what they're really doing is boxing themselves into a corner, because when a film underperforms, even slightly, it's labeled a failure, not because it didn't connect with audiences, but because the break-even point was set at Mount Everest. Maybe it's time to scale back. Maybe it's time to stop throwing $200 million at every single project and start trusting that a good story, told well, can still move people without needing to bankrupt a small country. And here's where the damage really creeps in. When studios assume audiences don't care, when they see original movies underperform and blame the crowd, they start shifting their entire slate. Less risk, less emotion, less new. They greenlight what's safe, what's formulaic, what tested well in the last 5 marketing surveys. That's why adult dramas are disappearing, why emotionally rich animation is being treated like filler content, and why everything is starting to feel the same. And it doesn't just affect what gets made, it affects how stories get remembered. Award campaigns, they thrive on momentum. On that buzz you can only generate through public reaction, on the ground, in theaters, with people reacting out loud. If a film drops on streaming with no build-up, no theatrical impact, no audience videos capturing live reactions, it's invisible before it even has a chance. The entire creative ecosystem is being warped by this misread of what audiences want and how they want to experience it. We don't need more IP, we need more trust. Trust in new voices, trust in emotional depth, trust in the audience to care if you give them something worth caring about. Because at the end of the day, Elio didn't fail because it was original. It failed because it was orphaned. Dropped into a theatrical landscape where audiences have to weigh every ticket like it's an investment decision, where studios no longer build momentum for emotional storytelling, and where analysts are more concerned with quarterly optics than cultural longevity. So when a Wall Street guy throws out, "Don't blame film execs, blame the audience," that's not analysis. That's deflection. It's an excuse to keep greenlighting safe bets and burying anything that challenges the algorithm. But audiences, we still show up for the stories that invite us in, for the ones that make us laugh, sob, gasp, cheer together. It's just harder than ever to do that when everything around the act of going to the movies is screaming, "Wait till it hits streaming." So yeah, don't blame the audience, blame the system. And maybe, just maybe, bring back a Tuesday night movie ticket that doesn't make us choose between seeing a film or eating dinner afterward. Make going to the movies joyful again, communal again, accessible again. Make going to the movies cheap again. Because if we can do that, we just might make people fall in love with original stories again too. Now let's kick it to you. What's the last movie you saw in theaters that actually moved you? And do you think that moment would have felt the same if you just watched it at home? Let me know down in the comments. And if you made it all the way to the end, drop the code word chicken jockey in the comments so I know you're part of the ride or die squad. And if you vibe with this breakdown, hit that playlist on your screen to check out more videos just like this one. So until next time.